Okay, my friends, I am shocked. I'm totally shocked. I was looking up some of the prophecies and so forth that I record every little thing that comes along and I store it, and then at some point I sometimes go back to it. A lot of it's just lost. But I happened to decide I would go back and look at some of the prophecies, because everything that I sort of vaguely recall points to these events we're seeing now. I mean, things are not good. They're not good. So, when I got to these texts that I had recorded, I realized some of these things I had written, and one of them is a pretty long poem. I'm going to read to you, and then we're going to go through these recorded texts, and most of them are from the Bible or from ancient cultures all around the world. Some from the Quran, some from all different sources, but primarily related to Jesus and what he thought about the Old Testament, which he said there was a veil cast over humanity by the Old Testament. And I'll run into that statement somewhere along the line here, probably. Now, I want to read to you my first poem that I just popped into as I came to look at this. And I mean, I have a lot of things recorded here, but let's start with that, because this is when I found the mud fossils. And I'm going to tell you right now, that was not my doing. Something came in my head, said, go look in the woods. I looked in the woods, I came back, I started looking for what it meant, because they were giants. You know, I started searching on giants. I can't remember, it was 15 years ago. And it popped up, these things are for you to see and for others as a test. And I said, whoa, woohoo. And I tried to find out where that came from. It was gone, never came back. And I have gotten other messages too, like look in the desert in Morocco. When I was in a state of absolute depression, nobody would listen to me. I was being rejected by everybody, and I mean with malice. And I in order to accomplish what I needed to do, I had to speak. And you speak, and it doesn't end well in 99% of the cases. And I have had people that get divorced and everything else, and I almost went down that road. I got to be honest with you. My wife just hated this, and she still is not real good with it. But it just never seems to be able to sink deep into some people. I can't help that. All I can do is show what I have discovered and how it relates to these ancient texts, because that's what I do. And Velikovsky was the one that did the deep research of literally recent historic events. It's only 3,500 years ago. We're not talking millions of years ago. We're talking 3,500 years ago. There were gods here on the earth, and Jesus Christ came back later, a couple thousand years ago, and said, hey, this is all real. You people all forgot. You lost your humanity. You forgot everything that happened to you. I'm coming back to you. I'm telling you this is real, and you better pay attention. And, of course, they killed him for it. But now I have literally, as far as I'm concerned, proven that the statements that were made are based in fact. Now, some of them could be a little this way or a little that way, or it could be totally wrong. But what I'm finding supports what was primarily written in the ancient myths about Gaia and Uranus and, Kronos and Zeus and all that stuff. And Zeus ended up being the guy that was put in charge of this solar system. He was the god of this solar system. He was Jupiter. And they don't die, I don't think. So we're still dealing with this group of entities, it appears to me. And again, I'm just looking for the truth. It's mind-boggling in anybody's mind. I don't care who you are. But we're going to go through this, and I'm going to start by reading you some of the things that I have recorded over the course of time, because they now seem to become pretty relevant to me anyway. And I do need to go back through them, so I'm going to drag you with me. All right, here we go. Okay, this is really getting crazy. because this is about Akhenaten. Now, Velikovsky also wrote a book about Oedipus and Akhenaten. And listen to this now. Between 1440 and 1415 was the Exodus. Now, they ate manna falling from heaven during the Exodus. And that, again, is 1440 BC. This is approximately the date that Velikovsky said we were impacted by Venus, according to all the records around the globe of all the different cultures. They all had the same story. About 1,500 years before Christ, this event occurred globally, worldwide, and now it's been pretty much recognized. And there's a layer of soils that's going to be red bed, gray clay, and black cap, which is because everything boiled and all of the flesh boiled into clay, literally. All the fleshy stuff, the really weak stuff on bodies, boiled into clay. Extreme amount of silicates, because all the skin contains 50 times the amount of silicon than in the rest of the body. So that all leaked out into these and created all the mud fossils. And this was a hot water flood, and it was because we almost got hit by Venus. Now this is pretty well established in Velikovsky's work, and it's now pretty well established in all of the archaeology and my mud fossils. The mud fossils basically proves it, as far as I'm concerned. And I had my DNA tested, and we got giants, we got dragons, we got all that stuff. So the ancient texts need to be revisited and thought about in a completely new way. And this is the key right here, Exodus. Well, how does manna fall out of the sky? And like I say, Venus almost hit Earth, and Venus was literally born as like a child would be born. So I would assume it might have a placenta. And when that almost impacted Earth, that placenta might have been raining down its cake. Basically, a placenta would basically dried out, and raining down would be like what they found here, this manna. And it rained down every day for 40 years, apparently. Well, they collected it in the morning. I guess it came down at night, which you want to think about these things in the cooking process too, because everything has to make sense, and it does. It's a material universe, but directed by gods, it appears. That's all I can make of it. All right, this is kind of crazy. I'm going back looking for this particular quote here, which is Luke 19:37 to 40. And as he approached the descent from the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of disciples began to praise God joyfully in a loud voice for all the miracles they had seen. And he performed all kinds of miracles. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest. Peace. But some of the Pharisees, the leaders, the religious leaders in the crowd, said to him, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. Tell them to stop cheering. And Jesus said, I tell you, he answered, if they remain silent, the very stones will cry out. And I say right now, mud fossils are screaming, literally screaming, to look at the ancient texts and to understand our true history and past and our relationship with God, Jesus Christ, all that stuff. It's a whole new day in this stuff. All right? I'm going to show you, and then I saw this up here. This blew me away. I look at it, I said, well, the timing is right, it seems, from the text, so it might just be the day, the end, soon. I said, what's that all about? So this is a poem I wrote. I guess I wrote it because I forgot, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm going to read it to you. Okay, listen to this now. Apparently I wrote this. I got to be honest with you, I do not remember, but this is Mudfossil's research studies the rocks and statements from the past. History is altered, but the rocks, they last. What was the chemistry and what were the tales? If you dig deeply and test, is there wind in the sails? Jesus said his body fell as manna during Exodus. What is this about? Is he trying to fool us? How can Jesus say this? How can this be? He is standing in front of us. He is here to see. Then the Jews came at him with rage and violence. He said, "Stop your grumbling. I want silence." They listened again as he said, "Truly, truly, this is a fact." They screamed, "You are lying, and proof you lack." Then the priests rose up and denied him. Pilate came along and they cried, "Let's try him." Barely a person alive does not know the story. His compassion and forgiveness is his divine eternal glory. When the Pharisees said, "Kill him," what did Jesus say? Some last words ring true in the future which is today. What happened there and what did he say? And what did they say? Leaders said, "Be silent and stop these cheers from your flocks." Jesus said in Luke 19:40, "If I am silent, you will hear from the rocks." Eternity is long, and I suggest you pray and hope you are heard. Mudfossils are Jesus speaking out loud, so hear, remember, and keep his word. For on his arrival, all will fall silent and have no words to say. The timing is right, it seems, from the text, so it might just be the day. The end, soon. I can't remember writing that. I wrote all kinds of stuff. I had so much stuff, and then it was just, you can only do so much, and then, it was a burden, because, not only was I trying to have a discussion, the suppression was incredible, and it came from the people that they talk about. Actually, they speak directly about the false teachers, and that's what we have now. They deny Christ. They deny anything that they don't want you to know about. That's not the way it's supposed to work. You're supposed to be, and there's a quote in here somewhere that says, "My greatest joy is to see that my children walk in truth." And that is just, we got one unhappy God, I can tell you that right now. If that was his happiness, forget about it. Okay, I got interrupted, so I'm not sure where I left off, but I'm going to tell you right now, there is a good possibility that Venus was a literal birth, blood, umbilical cord, placenta, the whole 9 yards. And this is what an umbilical cord looks like. The white parts here are primarily connective tissue that gives it the flexibility to move, and these red spots are fleshy parts and provide it with nutrition and flexibility. However, coming through and banging into our atmosphere, the connective tissue parts would disassociate from the gooey parts, and they would come down as stones. And I think that's possible where the stones came from during the 10 plagues. The blood obviously comes from the birth process. The manna, which fell for 40 years, right exactly during the same time frame, could have possibly been from the placenta. It's just nothing more than a bag of proteins, and it could cook into little flakes of bread like stuff. And all these plagues were a product of this impact into our atmosphere. Now, was this is all needs to be really looked into deeper. I'm working at it, but there's only so much I can look into, and So far, it's looking like there's some substance here. And I know it sounds just insanity, absolute total insanity. But these are exactly the events that happened. Heavy stones fell all over the earth. The skies combusted. The oceans basically almost boiled. And this was at around 1500 BC. Now, apparently there was several of these events during this time frame. Which one it was, when it happened, when the Exodus was, I'm not sure. But it falls in the time frame, a cataclysm, and from there we pick up the story. All right, so what was the claim? The claim was Venus, which is Venus here, was literally born from basically a female body part, which they call a vagina, and this is what Jupiter looks like with Earth, which is exactly the same size as Venus, sitting on top of the red spot. And then this is what it would look like if the red spot gave birth to a planet. And all of the rest of this stuff is all about giants. And I am going to show you how this exactly matches the anatomy of a human female body part. And if you don't want to see it, look away, because I'm going to go through all of these body parts right now, and it gets a bit graphic. All right, this is a mound. It's called the Venus Mons, which is just above the vagina in a human being. It's a mound above the vagina, and it bumps up like this. And the planet is spinning this way, or the clouds are coming this way, one way or the other. It's a stream of stuff, and it's just swirling past here because of the mound. It's got to come up and around it. It's not a swirling storm. It's pushing through the cloud layer. Now, this is what a birth would look like from a planet the size of Venus coming out of Jupiter. Now, it would come out and it would roll this way, backwards, right? Because it would just basically roll back. It would be pushing and rolled back this way. So it would roll this way. Venus is going that way. So this is what they call retrograde, backwards rolling planet. All the other planets basically roll long like they're going down a road. This one's going down the road, but it's going backwards. And that's why it's so hot. It's almost like 800, 900 degrees. Now, I want you to look at this carefully, because this is very important you understand the details. This is the Great Red Spot. Now, it obviously has the look of a vagina. Now, what can we really see for sure? What is this right here? You see that? That little flap coming up and that tag right there? That is how a vagina places into the body. This right here, you see this? This is the hairline. You see it? That's the hairline that goes around to the vagina. This is obviously the architecture, and that's the vaginal canal, and these here are what they call the vaginal ripples. And that's, don't forget this tag. This is the most important part, because you can see this absolutely undeniable as far as I'm concerned. Okay, like I said, a little graphic, but here it goes. Boom. There is a human vagina. Remember that tag I told you right there? That's that spot. There it is right there. You see the little flap coming into it? It's like, there's absolutely zero difference. Zero. You see that? And of course, there's the hairline around the outside. And this is the vaginal canal here. And there's the clitoris and the shaft of the clitoris, all that stuff it's all there. It's the same thing. It's identical. There is no difference. All right. Again, I go back to the ancient text, the ancient text. Now, this is Ovid, and he was not an ancient writer, but he wrote everything that was written before him and compiled it and correlated it and did a fabulous job. Now, he wrote at the time of Julius Caesar, was like just at the change of the millennium, about 0 AD, somewhere right in that area, 8 CE. Anyway, his books were Metamorphoses. Now, there's 250 myths, which are not really myths. And there was 15 books and almost 12,000 lines. Now let me show you explicitly what he wrote right immediately as he started his work. All right, these are some of his books. Book 1, The Creation. How did everything start? Ages of Mankind. How did that happen? He goes into the flood, the Great Flood. Deucalion, who was Noah, and Pyro was his wife. And then you got Apollo, Daphne, Phaeton, and it goes all the way down into Hercules and all of the, the muses, and on Helicon, the rape of Persephone, and Zeus, and it goes really deep, all the way down to book 15 until we get to Julius Caesar. And he describes every little detail, Achilles, and how they, Hercules shot the guys in the eyes with arrows, and here's Hercules, here the death of our Achilles. It's beyond anybody's wildest dreams. But if you read Apollodorus, it's basically the same thing, and that was written at I don't know, I can't remember, 180 BC, something like that. But it was a compilation of work, mostly based on Hesiod, who was the one that was told what to write by the daughters of Zeus. He was here at 800 BC. Zeus was still around. He was in control, and his daughters were the muses. That's the way I understand it. And they wanted this all recorded, and that's what Hesiod did. And Ovid came after him. Now listen to this. This is metamorphosis, which means transformation. All right? Themes of transformation are found in all types of mythologies. All of them. They all have the same thing. Greek mythology features a wide collection of myths where the subjects are physically transformed, usually either through divine intervention or sorcery and spells. Now listen to what it says right here. Metamorphosis, or transformation, like from a caterpillar to a butterfly, is the unifying theme. It unifies all his works amongst the episodes of Metamorphosis. Ovid raises its significance explicitly in the opening lines of the poem. They call them poems. In nova fert animus mutatus desere formos corpora. And what does that mean? It means I intend to speak of forms changed into new entities. These gods could change themselves into anything they wanted. It says, accompanying this theme is often violence inflicted upon a victim whose transformation becomes part of the natural landscape, which I have shown you or will. They are their natural landscape that we're living on right now. All right, so, and it says there's a great variety among the types of transformations, from human to inanimate objects like the Nile River or constellation, turn into animals or plants, ants, funguses, mushrooms, from one sex to another, from one color to another, and turn into pebbles. The metamorphoses themselves are often located metatextually. They didn't think of it as being real because it's just too far off the belief scale. I understand, but they could do this, and they did. And Zeus changed, all of the gods changed themselves into gods to come down and have sex with the women. That's what it was all about. There's 200 of them made a pact to go against the big god. They were put in charge of the system. I believe there was 600 of them. This is my understanding, and I could be totally wrong, but I believe there were 600 angels, which are these gods. And one of them became supreme, which is Zeus. And he said, let's just go against this whole deal, and we'll go down and have sex with all the women. Because that's what he did. He came down and had sex all over the place, had all kinds of kids. And they ended up having giants. And now then he had to destroy that. And he was still the god, and he was Jupiter, and Venus came out of Jupiter. So I have to assume that Jupiter, being Zeus, decided he had to wipe all this stuff out that he created because of his lust for the women. I don't see it any other way. And he's the guy that ended up wiping out all of the giants. And then I don't know whether he left or he just said, I'm just going to stay out here and leave you guys alone, and I should have done what I was supposed to do. I don't know. Maybe he's locked up in hell. I have no idea. But at this point, I think we're back in trouble again. Now, there's a whole lot to think about. Did the big God Almighty, force Jupiter to give birth to Venus? Or was it just Jupiter did it on his own accord to say, I have to wipe out all these giants and so forth? This is a lot of thinking to do here. But once you start to understand that these giants were not just silly things, this is all real. And the body parts in space, living planets, the Earth is a corpse, all recorded by Jesus, by the way. And it is. Okay, pretty much everything was based on what Hesiod said, because he was told what to write by the daughters of Zeus, which were the Muses. And this generally goes back between 750, 650 BC. I've heard 800 BC, somewhere in that area. And he wrote these different stories, the Works and Days, all right, around 700 BC, and the Theogony, which is the creation of everything, and all kinds of stuff he wrote about. Now, he was the one that was instructed by the daughters of Zeus. So the Muses on Mount Helicon came down to him while he was taking care of his sheep, and they presented him with a laurel staff, and they said, you write what we want you to write about our father, who is Zeus. And he wrote a lot. And hold on one second. Okay, apparently Hesiod was known at his time, and the scholars today say some scholars have detected a proto-historical perspective in Hesiod, a view rejected by Paul Cartledge. For example, on the grounds Hesiod advocates a not forgetting, so remember these things of the past, he advocates for not forgetting, without any attempt at verification. He had verification. He was writing down what the daughters of Zeus told him. Now, I have the verification that supports him. And as I read through this, I was blown away. I'm basically Hesiod. Listen to this. I'm not kidding. I felt like they're talking about me. Hesiod has also been considered the father of gnomic verse. Well, what's gnomic verse? It consists of meaningful sayings put into verse to aid the memory. Well, I do that sometimes. He had a passion for systematizing and explaining things. I do. I need to explain it. I want people to understand. He wanted ancient Greek poetry, and they talked about poetry, but it was like stories. Ancient Greek poetry and stories, actually, in general, had strong philosophical tendencies, and Hesiod, like Homer, demonstrated a deep interest in a wide range of philosophical issues, which I do too, in addition to material issues. All right, from the nature of divine justice to the beginnings of human society. I do, absolutely. Aristotle believed that the question of first causes may even have started with Hesiod. First causes. And that's, the theogony. How did everything start? All right? He viewed the world from outside the charmed circle of aristocratic rulers, which now really are the academics. He was protesting against their injustices in a tone of voice that has been described as having a grumpy quality, redeemed by a gaunt dignity, whatever that means. But as stated in the biography section, he could also change to suit the audience. You see, yeah, sometimes you have to, yes. This ambivalence appears to underlie his presentation of human history in works and days. He presented everything, and then they all pretty much worked off of his stories, backing them up by other sources, and Velikovsky backs all this stuff up by everybody's story all around the world, everywhere on the globe, every culture. They have no contact between each other, some of these that we know of, and they had the same stories, the same events at the same times, the same catastrophes. The catastrophe is the key. Once you understand the catastrophe was the same, then you start to look for associations in what was said that support this. And that's when I went to Apollodorus. And Apollodorus 1.6.3 is Typhon in a desert. All right, this is Apollodorus, Library 1, and he was the writer of the ancient text, and he researched it quite well. He said the sky was the first who ruled over the... Oh, boy. All right, you see this? This is supposedly the story of our universe, and we're talking about the Library of Apollodorus. Book 1 is the birth of Zeus, war of the Titans, the Olympian gods, Apollo, Artemis, Demeter, and Persephone, the war of the giants, and Typhon, 1.6.3. Then you got Prometheus, who was supposedly the one who created man, and Deucalion was his son, who is Noah. And then it comes down and down, and then you get, then you got a book 2. All right, the wars of Heracles, sons of Perseus. Book 3. All this stuff, the Pleiades, and I mean, this gets very, very deep. Epitome, Trojan Wars, Odyssey, all this stuff. Now, this Zeus, they're talking about Zeus. Zeus killed all the Titans and smote them with thunderbolts and hurled them down into Tartarus. Is this possibly true? How could this be true? But when I looked up 1.6.3, we're back here where it says Typhon, the giants in Typhon. Where is it? Way back here. There it is right there. War of the Giants and Typhon, 1.6.3. Now, let's just go with 1.6.2, and then I'll bring you into 1.6.3. All right. They're talking about giants being killed all over, the slaughter and all the giants. Let's just read it. All right. This is 1.6.2. In the battle, Porphyrion attacked Hercules and Hera. Nevertheless, Zeus inspired him with lust for Hera. And when he tore her robes and would have forced her, she called for help. Zeus smote him with a thunderbolt, and Hercules shot him dead with an arrow. As for the other giants, Ephides was shot by Apollo with an arrow in the left eye, and by Hercules in his right eye. Eurystheus was killed by Anisus with a thyrus, and Cleistus by Hector with torches. Mimas by Hephaestus with missiles of red-hot metal. Euclidus fled, but Athena threw on him in his flight the island of Sicily. These creatures were, I mean, this is unbelievable stuff, and she flayed Phalus and used his skin to shield her own body in the fight. Pholibus was chased through the sea by Poseidon and came to Kos. And Poseidon, breaking off that piece of the island, which is called Nisrium, threw it on him. And Hermes, wearing the helmet of Hades, slew Hephaestus in the fight. Armistice slew Gratian, and the Fates, fighting with brazier clubs, killed Argus and Thoas, and the other giants Zeus smote and destroyed with thunderbolts, and all of them Hercules shot with arrows as they were dying. That's pretty serious stuff. If it's true, that's pretty serious. Now, what happened next? Now we get into Typhon. You see Typhon here? When the gods had overcome the giants. All right, hold on one second. When the gods had overcome the giants. All right, Earth, it appears, was on the side of the giants, because the gods, who were not from Earth apparently, overcame the giants who Earth gave birth to, basically. Earth became enraged. Earth, still more enraged, had intercourse with Tartarus and brought forth Typhon. Typhon is the dragon. Now listen to this, and here's why I say he's the dragon. She brought him forth in Sicilia, a hybrid between man and beast. Now listen to this very, very, very carefully. In size and strength, he surpassed all the offspring of Earth. And we know there was Titans miles high before this. So he surpassed them all. And we're going to see Typhon in a minute. As far as the thighs, just the thighs they talk about. He was of human shape. Only the thighs they talk about. And of such prodigious bulk that he outtopped all the mountains, and his head often brushed the stars. And I'm going to tell you, he would be so tall that his head would be at least 3 times as high as the space station right now. Now, one of his hands reached out to the west and the other to the east, and from them projected 100 dragon's heads. All of those dragon's heads were burnt off by Zeus, it says. And then he cut Typhon's throat. Now listen to this very, very, very carefully. We talked about his thighs, and they were like human. From there down, he had coils of vipers, and it has like a leathery skin on it, and I can show you that. His body was all winged, unkempt, hair streamed on the wind from his head and cheeks. Fire flashed from his eyes, red fire. Such and so great was Typhon, when hurling kindled rocks, burning rocks. He made for the very heavens with hissing and shouts. Now listen to this so carefully. Spouting a great jet of fire from his mouth. Spouting a great jet of fire from his mouth. When the gods saw him rushing at heaven, they made for Egypt in flight. All right, so they were scared. And being pursued, they changed their forms into those of animals. They changed their forms into animals. Now Zeus pelted Typhon at a distance with thunderbolts, and at close quarters struck him down with an adamantine sickle. And as he fled, pursued him closely, and so forth. Now, so Zeus killed Typhon in the desert, and it goes on and on and on. I mean, this is very, very detailed. Winged horses, chariots of winged horses, pelting Typhon with thunderbolts, pursued into the mountains. Prometheus molded men out of water and earth. He gave him fire, which Zeus did not like, and he nailed him to a. Anyway, it goes on and on. Hercules released him after he was nailed to the mountain for many, many years, bound to the mountain for many years. Every day, an eagle swooped in, devoured the lobes of his liver. This is just insane stuff. But could it have been true? Maybe. The things I'm finding, let me show you Typhon. There's no question about Typhon. And I'll show you all the things he said about him, and you look at it, you see what you think. Okay, let me just go through these once again. I think I showed you most of these, maybe not. This is the vagina on Venus. On Jupiter, which gave birth to Venus. All right, this is basically what it would look like according to the Great Red Spot. And that's the size of the planet that would come out of there. And here's what it looks like from a distance. And this all swirls around here because this is a mound, just like what they call a Venus Mons on a woman's body. It's just the bump right above the vagina. And that's a bump. The clouds have to swirl around it. This isn't a storm. The clouds have to swirl around the bump. Now, this is the Venus impact scars of electric discharge. And I almost hit Earth, and it did hit Mars. And this is the evidence that shows absolute catastrophe on Venus. This is the size of Earth. This is almost a third of the way around of Earth would be this scar. And look at this is very, very serious. And this is exactly what you would see in electrical discharges, which is what this would happen between this thing smacking into our atmosphere. It would create the Kashmir effect, which is an extreme amount of electric discharge. Now, what we're going to be well, let me just finish up with the stuff that is on Earth. This is the size of that's a vagina, and that little line right up the center is, they call it the hunter's cut. They also call it the linea alba, and the seam is where the body seams together. This is a coffin birth. This is the baby's head. All right, you see that? That's the baby's head right there, poking through that side of the wall because it's weak, and that's the tissue. See it coming? He's poking his head right out. There's his arm and his shoulder. The hand is broken off, and this is that linea alba right up the center. And all of these giant women have the same anatomy, obviously, and when they got soaked, when they dried up, they split a little bit. Now this one didn't lose much. It's still got a ton of blood in it because you can see all the green growing. That means there's still a lot of bodily fluids in there, tissue that's supporting this, and it's pink, so that makes sense. Now this is in Sonoma. This is another vagina, and that's people in there, and that's that linea alba. And these are the colors of tissue in certain conditions. They normally turn black and red. Black is the vein blood. The red is the fleshy and the red bloodish areas. Here's another one. That's that linea alba. Now see this right here? That is like a vaginal mat, and it covers that linea alba like a web. And it only exists a certain distance, and then you get down into the normal vaginal canal. And of course, it's the linea alba is right there once again. Now this one is exactly the architecture of these ripples that are the vaginal ripples. You see all these little pocket-looking things, and these layering, and then you have the linea alba. And this guy's trying to figure out what he's looking at. Now check this out. This thing is absolutely unbelievable. I think it's the world's deepest cave, vertical cave. Look at this. These are guys standing, I don't know how many feet apart, or way apart. These are all the layers of tissue. Those are layers of tissue. You see this right there? That's the linea alba. You see, remember I showed you that mat? That's the mat, and that's the linea alba running right up the middle of it. And this is the rest, the normal vaginal tissue. All of these little, it makes it so that it can flex and do all kinds of things. And that's the linea alba, and that's that mat that I showed you before in this one. Same, remember that one? It's the same mat as this. And the linea alba is in the middle. That's it right there. Now, there were males that were just gigantic too. That's a person standing there. Now, that is a circumcised penis. This is not unusual to have an erection at death. And they call it angel envy or something like that. But that is a circumcised penis. Now, were there non-circumcised? Yes, there was. You see that? I mean, I'm sorry. That's just what it is. And as far as I'm concerned, that is an uncircumcised penis. and the scrotum. Well, home, home, home on the range. Now you got to admit, that is creative. I mean, that's creative as hell. That's a penis. And I believe this is one of the testicles. And that little spot right there is where the core of the testicle is. It looks like that to me, but it is quite obviously a penis house. All right, here's the answer to the question that I was wondering about. Who was it that sent the destruction to the earth? Zeus. It was Zeus would destroy the men of the Bronze Age. Deucalion, who was Noah, by the advice of his father Prometheus, constructed a chest, which is the ark, storing it with provisions he took off, and Zeus poured heavy rain, and which was actually the impact of Venus. Now, they don't speak of it that way, but you know, it does talk about I believe, I'm pretty sure that was the event that caused all this destruction. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is crazy, and I don't say it wasn't crazy, but it appears to be possibly accurate. Now, here's what happened. After the rain ceased and they landed and they sacrificed to Zeus, Zeus sent Hermes to Deucalion, who was Noah, and allowed him to choose what he would. And he chose to get men. He wanted men. At the bidding of Zeus, he took up stones and threw them over his head, and the stones which Zeus threw with Deucalion became men. The stones which Phaera threw became women. Hence, the people were called metaphorically people Laos, from Laos, which means a stone. This is just too much. But it was what was written. Now, if Typhon was correct, I have to think that all these other things at least have some possibility of being true. I have found the giants. I can see all this stuff. I can see where the birth of Venus came from, and Jupiter and all that. I think I've gone through all that stuff pretty clearly. I hope you've seen it. So now let's talk about Typhon and how the gods turned themselves into animals as Typhon spit a great blast of fire out. Did he hit an animal? Well, maybe. All right, you remember the text. It said his hair was all winged and unkempt, and he had a red flaring eye, and he was spitting nasty venom and fire down at the gods who had changed themselves into animals. This, I say, is body fluid runoff from a dead, decaying dragon. And this is the scales of his throat, and this right in here is his throat. And here he is right here above it. Here's the two of them side by side, or top of the other. All right, now there's his red flared eye. There's this fuzzy stuff that comes down, the fluty looking stuff down the side of him. We're going to go close and look at this in the scales and all that right now. But remember, this is what you're going to be looking at. So clear your mind. It's a big, big, big spectacular thing to look at, and a change of your mind to saying this is not just rocks, these are scales, and you'll see they are. But the crazy thing is, people just can't see this. Some people won't see it, no matter how obvious it is. They won't see it, and I'll show you how obvious it is. So let's take a look. All right, remember they talked about Typhon being standing up, would be his head would touch the stars. Now, if he was 1,100 miles long, that would be pretty good size. Now, here's Typhon's head right here. Remember I showed you a second ago. Let's come right down on it. All right, now just take your time. Take your time. Look around. This is his nose. And his head comes up like this, and all that fluty, flary stuff going down. This is the little thing that you see on the parades in China and so forth. It's just like the flashy, fuzzy little fluty thing that goes down the side. Here's his red flared dragon's eye, and it's just flashing red like fire out of there. You see it? That's his red, streaming, flashy red eye. Now, I said this was his throat. Remember I showed the scales out here? Those are the scales running all the way down, all the way down, all the way down, and it goes all the way down to his stomach, obviously. Now, his throat is right behind here. We're going to come in real close in a second. So you'll see scales, and then behind it you'll see his throat. Alright, so here we go down. Don't forget, here's his head and his red flashy eye. This is right down his throat. So right here we're inside of his throat, right inside here. Out here is the scales that coat his throat. Still the throat is here, and the scales are out here. The throat is here, and the scales are out here. The throat comes down, right down here, and the scales are out here that coat his throat. This is caved in. Now, it comes down, 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 down. These are the plates that were the scales that coated his throat. Now, they become very, very regular right about here. This was a jowl sort of area. All right, this is sort of a jowly area. And then it goes right into his real good, solid throat area. See these little plates? Each one of them has a hinge to it, a hinge, a hinge, a hinge, a hinge, a hinge. Why? Why, Roger? Well, so he could bend his neck. Otherwise, you don't have a hinge. You can't do that. It couldn't move. It's going to be a straight thing. This is perfect architecture for doing that particular job. You see? And it just keeps going the same way all the way down. Those aren't just mountains. And that isn't just a valley that follows right along here. This is the throat, where he swallowed things, whatever he swallowed, and they must have been pretty big. And this is the scales that coated his throat. This is all runoff. You see this, all this stuff here, this red and black and yellowish looking stuff? That is body fluids running out of a dead, decaying, in this case, gigantic dragon. Now his throat continues all the way, all the way, all the way, all the way down into his stomach, which is down here. Alright, this is like his gizzard up here. This is his whole body. And don't forget, these are the thighs of a human. And then it goes into coils, and they could run right around here, all the way around here. And I'll show you those up close in a second. His body runs all the way from here, all the way across, and this is his body, his main body. And this right here is where he poops. And they're living in the fertile valley here, which is right here, is where he poops. This is where it runs down into the fertile valley where they're living, because that's when it's, let's say he's not alive now, but there's still all of this residue running down. That's why it's nice and green here. And this one side is the poop side, and this is where the urine normally would go. This is a cloaca. All right, and then it would come right out of here and just flow out, which it does, into the desert and poops. Now, his tail continues. Okay, so here's his head, comes down, here's his body, here's his legs, here's his tail, continues from where he poops all the way out, and right over here is more dragon scale, very easily to see, very easy to see. You see? Why is all this colored stuff running out of here, real dense like that? That's where blood is leaking out. All right, now, he might have been injured back here, I don't know. But blood is running out of this whole area, and it's probably like a little bit of a depression, and the blood is settling down there, running out. And his tail runs all the way back here. This is all the fluty tail from the back. They had big flashy tails on them, all the way from here, all the way across. Now, remember it said he was spitting out flame and fire and all nasty stuff? Now, don't forget, here's his head again. There's his eye. This is his throat. Now, dragons have beards, and he's no exception. You see this right here? That's the beard, and that's the other beard. They have two beards. All right, take your time and look at that. Let me back it back out again. This is coming right out of here. And this is the toxin. This stuff is the toxin. And between mixing from here and from here, you get an explosion of two, this particular chemistry mixes with this particular yellow chemistry, and you get this explosion right here. All right, let's look at it carefully. Don't forget, there's something going on up in here with this fluid coming out of here. Now, what it is exuded by, I'm not sure, but it's coming out of something up in this area, and it's shooting it down here. And you see how nasty this stuff is? It's coming down, and when it hits this stuff coming out of his beard, the two of them mix together here and make unbelievable nastiness. All right, you see these things coming together, and what we're looking at here, that's nasty. And it comes down, and it makes all this very, very vile, caustic, aggressive chemistry, basically. You see that? That is the dragon spit. Now, it's attacking the fish. And you say, whoa, what fish is that? I said, well, the fish right below where he's attacking. And I said, oh, you didn't see the fish? Well, let me show you a the fish. I go, oh! Help, I lost control. Oh! Hold on one second. I'm out of control. Here we go. This is why I don't play video games. No, here's the fish. Just forget this part here, because I think this is obscured in some way. I think this is his eyeball right here. And these are scales. Now, let me just point these out, because some people get confused when they see this here. I'm not sure what's going on here. But let's just start from here back. I think this is his eye. And these are the big scales that come on a fish. They have scales. Every one of those is a scale. All right, now, remember he spit all that dragon stuff out. And this is the fish's fin. So let's highlight the fish one time. Here's the fish. There's his body, the fleshy body. Here it goes around. Then there's the tail here. It's a little bit, something ran over the top of it. But here's the body, comes down. The tail is like here. It comes up, and there's the rest of his body, comes back to here. Now what this is, I'm not certain. But let's forget about that. I think that's his eye. Now, so here's the back of the fin of the fish. This is the vital flesh right here. All right, this whole thing is vital flesh. But this part here got damaged by what the dragon spit out. So let's look at that specific place. All right, here's the dragon. Again, here's his throat, comes all the way up. I showed it very clearly, I believe. And this is just runoff. This means nothing. That's just bodily fluids that have invaded the area. But this is his body. And this is where he spit out all that toxic stuff. And I showed it to you pretty clearly. Now, what happened when it hit the fin? Well, it ate into the fin terribly. And then it continued on and hit his vital flesh right here. Not only did it hit it, it actually liquefied the surface so you can see right down into the blood vessels. You see this? Now, if you know anybody who's a doctor or an anatomist or anybody that can get to pick up an anatomy book, they will see their arteries come and feed the blood vessels, which are the smaller ones. And the blood vessels go down to, I believe they call them arterioles, which are the little tubes coming off of each one of the blood vessels. And then they go down into the capillaries. These are the capillaries, and then they dump into the vein system to be sent back through the heart to be recharged. All right, and that's what you have here everywhere. All right, everywhere. All right, so this has eaten through the top layer of this fish, and you can see the biology. I mean, there's no way you can miss this if you're being realistic. And I know it's a big brain stretch, but I can't help that. It's true. You see those? Those are all capillaries. And back from that, you end up getting back into the red blood. Black is when it's all done, everything's gone, the oxygen's out of it, the whole thing, and you're sending it back to get recharged. Now, that's pretty spectacular. So, in the text it said they changed themselves into animals. Well, that's an animal, it's a fish. And it was being attacked, as it said, spitting great fire. He attacked them. And it looks like he got the fish. Now, who was the fish? It might have been Venus. I saw somewhere else that Venus changed herself into a fish. Now, let me show you some close-ups of the skin and so forth. Because over here, this is skin. You see that? That's not just sand dunes. I'll show you. I have some better shots I can show you. Anyway, I'll show you some other ones. All right, this just makes it a lot easier because it's got to focus in and all that stuff. This is that area I was just showing you. This, my friends, is like ostrich hide. It's something very, very, very similar. Now, this is it a little closer up. You see the way these are the investments in the skin, and these let it do all this kind of stuff and then come back to where they're anchored. All right, and that's what all those little bumps are that we just saw before. All right, every one of those is an anchor. And the skin can do this and this and that and all these other things, but they always come back to where they're tagged in. It's like a staple. All right, and all the other stuff is sort of movable. That's what leather is all about. Now, I showed you, let's see, what's this? I think this was over the top of the fish. I can't remember. All right. I know I showed you about Venus being born from the feared god Jupiter, from the great red spot, which is a vagina. And now we also have this event occurring, where instead of being this oval shape, it has turned round. And blood is running off, it's sloughing off all this red stuff. And this only goes back to 2019. All right, it's a 5-day period where blood ran off, and the way they said it was slabs of red matter came out, and they thought it was going to fall apart and stop being a red spot. No, that in my mind sure looks like very close to a birth event. Now again, this was like 4 years ago. Okay, I don't know if I started with Velikovsky or not. No. Okay, so we are going to be getting back to Velikovsky. I'm going to do these very methodically and slowly, and they're going to be fairly long in YouTube time, but they're going to be pretty much what Velikovsky said. The prologue from chapter 1, I may skip a couple spots. I went through it, and it gets to, I don't think many people are going to listen to it if I let it just play. But we're getting into Venus and Mars and all these things that Velikovsky said happened during this time. And these were the things that were written in all these different cultures. And he's very, very thorough. So, and this again is an audio book, and it's nicely presented by James Cameron Stewart. So I guess I'm going to hold it off today for this. There's a lot to digest here, and it's a little bit scary, but it's something to consider. It's up to you how you handle it. Anyway, I'm going to continue on because I'm in the process of learning myself. I don't know all this stuff, trust me. I am going back at it. It's knowing some of it, but very little. And like I said, I'll drag you through it with me, that's all. If you want to get drugged through, well, then you're going to be drugged through. Okay, you saw my claims about Venus, and this will be what he's saying happened with Venus. Part 1, Chapter 1, and this is all about Venus, and then Mars, Chapter 1, and all about Mars. And then he's got other books that are about Oedipus and Akhenaten, because this was the time of the changing of multi-gods to a singular god, and that also plays into this very deeply. And he research that side of it as well. Nothing is one thing. This is my saying. Nothing is one thing. If you are going to look at something, you better be able to look at the whole thing, or you're just making things up. Everything's got to fit. It's like a puzzle. You can't have this piece and nothing else, or you can't have a piece over here, a piece over here, and nothing that makes them work together. They all have to work together. That's what we're trying to do. And in order to do that, it's a time-consuming deep dive into what Velikovsky said, because he already did the work. This is not my work, this is his work, and I'm just examining it to what I have discovered that already I know supports basically everything he said. And then when I get to Apollodorus, I support everything Apollodorus said. This is earth-shattering stuff, to be perfectly honest with you. So stay tuned. I'm sorry, it's a mind breaker, but it's, if you want to walk in truth, you got to look at the reality of the situation. I love you all. Stay with me. We'll get through this, and I think it has an impact on eternity for us all. All right, I still love you. Talk to you later. Bye.